It is the most common form of cancer. We're talking about skin cancer. Are you at risk of skin cancer? Can you go to a regular doctor for a skin check, or do you really need to see a dermatologist? These are just some of the questions that we are going to be talking about today on The Healthy Dude. I'm Curtin Williams. We are joined by Dr. Jason Wilson, the Medical Director of Oncology for Sentara Health, the Peninsula region. You specialize in breast cancer and melanoma, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Hey, I want to start with, do you think that there are people who, like a good percentage of people who are walking around right now and don't know that they have skin cancer?
I mean, it's almost certainly the case that there are people that are walking around and have no idea. The American Cancer Society estimate is that for skin cancer, it's somewhere around 3 million diagnoses a year. Most of those are going to be basal cell and squamous cell. So those aren't the melanoma skin cancers that people worry the most about.
So when you say basal cell,
yes.
If I have that, and it's not the one that you worry about, melanoma, is that a big deal?
Yeah, so these skin cancers can still cause problems. Just because they tend to be less aggressive than melanoma doesn't mean that they can't be. And they can also cause problems in the skin itself. And so,
like what, tissue damage?
They can just get to be bigger in size. And so when they get bigger, they're just harder to take care of. So they can become a problem, in the skin itself. And so still getting those addressed is important.
So there's what you mentioned, basal cell, and then what was this?
Squamous cell.
And then there's melanoma.
And then there's melanoma.
Are there others, or are those the top three kind of biggies?
Those are the main three. There are certainly others. For example, there's one called Merkel cell. That's extremely less common. So if you think about the others I talked about, where there's like 3 million diagnoses a year, Merkel cell is more like 3,000 in the whole country. So it's much less common. That's a very specific type of skin cancer. Tends to actually be more aggressive than melanoma.
So, it's summertime. And I don't want people to hear this and go, they're going to tell me to stay out of the sun and lather on the sunblock. And, I don't want to hear that. And so what is the safe way to enjoy time, without feeling like you have to go to the extreme? Because, when you hear some people say, long pants and long sleeves and a hat and lather up, I mean, that may be like good sound advice, but I mean, there's going to be a big chunk of people who are not going to follow that. I mean, you're not going to go to the beach in long pants and a long sleeve shirt and wear a hat, so what's the point? So is there like a common ground? Is there something called safe tanning? I mean, as a doctor, you're like, I'm not sure I can say that.
Yeah, I'm definitely not sure I can say that there's such a thing as safe tanning. Certainly, tanning beds are not a great idea because the UV exposure is one of the things that increases the risk. But we live in Hampton Roads, right? One of the things that's beautiful about living here is our access to outdoor activities. Whether it's fishing or the beach or just being out on a boat or I live up on the peninsula, Colonial Williamsburg. There's so much stuff that we can do outside. So we have to figure out how we can do it as safely as possible. So I will be one of those people that says, if you're the best is to minimize the sun exposure, right? So the sun exposure is worse from 10 to 4. So if there are things that you can do in your yard before 10 o'clock, try to get those done then. But if you're out, yes, I'm a big fan of, when I'm out wearing a hat. Ideally, you want to wear a hat that has kind of a rim around the edge, because that will help protect your ears, will help protect your neck.
So not just a ball cap. I mean, you got to go full on Crocodile Dundee,
A ball cap is still better than no hat, right? Because it's still protecting your scalp and things like that, which are all places that, those of us that take care of melanoma have seen it. But then, yes, wearing sunscreen. If you're going to go to the beach, wear sunscreen. Ideally, an SPF of 30 or above. And then making sure that you reapply it, right? That was always my challenge as a child and growing up, is not just putting it on the one time. It's you're going to be out, you're going to get sweaty, you're going to be in the water. You got to make sure every couple of hours.
Are you reapplying every time you come out of the water?
I try to make sure I do it at least every 2 hours or so to make sure that I get covered and get exposed, or to make sure I'm protected from the UV lights.
And and they're just like there are so many brands out there. There's so many numbers out
Right.
there. I mean, you see, I think you can maybe like SPF like 50 or even above. Are you accomplishing anything like trying to find the highest number?
Once you get past 30, I think you're going to get diminishing returns. Like it's certainly going to improve it, but the amount is probably less significant after 30. Less than 30, it's probably not helping you as much as you want. So I'd at least try to hit 30 or above. But I would
Do you
not,
put it on every day?
every day? I do not, but I spend a lot of time indoors every day.
Well, I guess I would imagine that people are probably more aware
Yes,
of doing it when they go to the beach,
for sure.
when they're going to the pool.
Yes.
But I'm wondering, like as far as like if you're just going to go and do yard work, if you're going golfing or fishing, I mean, you might not necessarily think about it. And,
Sure.
And you're saying what anytime you're outdoors.
Yeah, I think
for an extended
I think
period
if
of
you're going to be
time?
out for an extended period of time, that's when you really have to think about it. And I for sure would think about it if you're going to be out on a boat, if you're going to go fishing, because now you not only have the UV lights coming down, you have it reflecting off the water and coming back at you too. So kind of doubly important if you're out doing water sports.
All right.
For us, I think about it if I'm going to be out for a long period of time. We spent the 4th of July in Colonial Williamsburg, so that's a time where I'm starting to think about, okay, I'm going to be out there for a while. Maybe I should think about putting that sunscreen on.
All right. There's a lot more that we need to get from Dr. Wilson. He mentioned tanning beds, so I want to unpack that a little bit more. How is skin cancer treated? What's the impact of not getting treated? That and more when we come back on The Healthy Dude. All right, welcome back to The Healthy Dude. We're continuing our conversation with Dr. Jason Wilson, a surgical oncologist who specializes in breast cancer and melanoma with Sentara Health. A moment ago, you mentioned tanning beds, and I would think that there's still some people out there that think, all right, I'm not being baked in the sun. This has got to be a little better.
It really isn't. The tanning beds are really bad. It's all that UV exposure, and so that it is something that we know helps impact and helps increase the risk of developing skin cancer.
Should you primarily be concerned, like if you're have a fair complexion? You hear that there's some people that are like really, and so who's most vulnerable?
So for sure, those of us that have a fair complexion, those of us that have lighter hair, blonde hair, red hair, those are the people that are at most risk. But I always caution and say, just because you're not in that group doesn't mean that you have no risk. So people.
You're saying I could get skin cancer?
That is correct.
People of color?
Yes.
Or
So definitely less. So I like numbers. So for someone that's white, it's about 3% chance. If you kind of take everybody. For someone,
that seems kind of low.
it does.
And so I would imagine people who are hearing that going, wait a minute, 3%? That means I have a 97% chance I'm not going to get it.
It's correct.
What do you want to say, though, to put that into context?
Yeah, that's most of us know 100 people, so that means someone in that group that is going to develop melanoma skin cancer, and so it's still important to take care of. But to your point, like to your question, someone that's black, it's less. It's about 1 in 1,000, but it's not 0.
Yeah.
And so I think it's still important to think about sunscreen and doing sun protection when you're out in the sun.
Have you had to treat any African American people for skin cancer?
Yes.
And you're real?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Definitely comes up.
And so if it's neglected, full disclosure, I mean, I get a regular physical, and they do my blood work and cholesterol and blood pressure. I do not have them do kind of like a once over to see if if there's anything on my back, any moles or anything. So can like a general can a nurse practitioner, can a regular doctor do a good once over, or should you be every year seeing a dermatologist?
So I think if your primary care has a special interest in it, and then I think they can do it. But a lot of the benefits of getting a dermatologist to do it is, one, sometimes they have special equipment, whether it's magnification, where they can kind of look at the edges of things, and they also tend to be a bit more thorough potentially. They want to make sure that they're looking in the scalp. You want to make sure that they're looking on your back, particularly the places that you can't see, on your feet, which seems like a place that you shouldn't be able to get melanoma, but certainly have seen it. You can
Just
actually get it under your fingernails. So
From people who are just out maybe barefoot a lot? I mean, how?
One of the things that we don't totally understand about melanoma is it can show up in places that aren't sun exposed. Even sun exposure still is a risk for it showing up in those places, but it does sometimes show up in places that aren't sun exposed.
Where is it most likely going to show up?
So for men, it's going to typically be in the chest, the trunk, the back. Like that's kind of the most common place. For women, it's going to actually be more likely to be like on the legs, on the lower extremity there. But then it can also show up. Ears is a common place that
I have a
we'll
fishing
see it.
buddy who's dealing with that on his ears right now, and I would imagine that people are maybe good about putting the sunscreen on their forehead, maybe if they have like a balding spot, their shoulders and chest. But I wouldn't be surprised if people aren't thinking so much about lathering up the ears.
Right, and so having seen it enough now, that's why I pay special attention to my ears, and that's why if I'm going to be out on a boat, I do try to make sure I wear that brimmed hat so that I'm getting protection along my ears there.
All right. So if it's untreated, I mean, what's the range of what what the impact can be?
Right. So I often will start my conversation with people that come in to talk about melanoma with, melanoma gets this really bad reputation because of its ability to spread to other places in a way that squamous cell and basal cell don't typically do. But the good news is most of the melanomas that we find are going to be early stage. When we think about stage, we're really kind of thinking about, well, how big is it, or how deep is it in the skin? Is it in the lymph nodes? When we find that it's small and in the skin, the survival, and for cancer we often talk about 5-year survivals, that survival is in the high 90s. It's almost 100%. So for a lot of people, if we can find it early, and we can often just do surgery, and that's all that's required. If the melanoma continues to grow, that's when it figures out or can get the ability to spread to other places. And the first place we tend to see it spread to are going to be lymph nodes. So the lymph nodes are like the glands people talk about when they get sick. Their glands swell up in the neck. They're really the filters of the body. So when people get sick, they're kind of filtering all that stuff and get swollen. The same thing can happen as cancer is trying to spread. They wind up getting filtered into the lymph nodes, and they can start to enlarge. So a lot of times as part of our surgery, we'll check the lymph nodes. If the lymph nodes all feel normal, we'll do a special surgery, excise where the melanoma is, and then we actually do a dye injection that morning, and that dye gets injected and goes to the first 1 or 2 lymph nodes that drain the piece of skin where that melanoma is, because we want to know if that lymph node has melanoma in it or not, because that often is the difference between the melanoma being stage 1 or 2 and it being stage 3.
When it is stage 3,
Yes.
what does that mean?
So stage 3 kind of broadly means that it's made it to the lymph nodes. And once it's made it to the lymph nodes, the chance of it metastasizing or going somewhere else in the body and becoming stage 4 go up. So generally, once it becomes stage 3, now we're generally much more likely to be thinking about treatments in addition to surgery.
Like, for instance?
Yeah, so one of the things I love about being in healthcare is seeing how things progress and change over time. So from like the breast cancer standpoint, we've gone from really, really big surgeries to smaller and smaller surgeries. When I finished fellowship, there were only 1 or 2 treatments for melanoma if your lymph nodes were positive. And they were okay, but they weren't great, and they had lots of side effects. Now, especially if you watch the commercials, you can see that there are all kind of different immunotherapies. And these immunotherapies are very effective at melanoma, and so they have been really remarkable at how effective they are at helping to treat melanoma. And kind of the way there are several of them, but kind of the way they work is they're really revving your body and your immune system up to go after the cancer. Because the body doesn't want that cancer there. It doesn't belong.
Yeah.
So if you can rev the immune system up, it will help fight that cancer.
All right, I want to talk a little bit more about that. We're going to take another break and then continue our conversation with Dr. Jason Wilson. Welcome back to The Healthy Dude. We are continuing our conversation with Dr. Jason Wilson, Medical Director of Oncology for the Peninsula region with Sentara Health. We've been talking about skin cancer, who's at risk, the treatment options. You were mentioning immunotherapies. I mean, give me like for example, of like what you're talking about.
Yeah, so these medications are given by the oncologist, and they basically activate your immune cells to go after the cancer. And these are very effective, so much that they've really changed kind of how we think about melanoma, where in the past, if I go back to when I was a fellow, if you had lymph nodes that you could feel on somebody when they came in, we were basically talking about doing a excision, and then we would take out all those lymph nodes, and then they would go on to some sort of therapy. Now, the data is very compelling that you give people immunotherapy to try to help shrink those lymph nodes down. And you often will see really, really good responses from that immunotherapy. It is very effective.
But to be clear, when people hear pancreatic cancer, that sounds so scary.
Yes.
And so there are certain cancers that I think probably get a lot of attention as they should and strike a certain amount of fear. But untreated, I mean, melanoma can kill you.
That's correct, for sure. The good thing is we certainly have more treatments now. Like I think about, I certainly don't know all the details, but I know Jimmy Carter had metastatic melanoma for years and underwent treatment. And so we have a lot more options than we did in the past. And so definitely something to be attuned to and make sure you get checked out.
All right. So when you see a mole pop up on your skin and you're like, wait a minute, I don't recall that being there.
Right.
How do you not go into a freak out mode, and how do you know, like, all right, is this a regular mole or is this a bad mole? What should you do?
Yeah, I was going to be like, I never discourage somebody from getting checked. The things that we kind of look at to determine whether a mole is going to be something that we're of concern or not can kind of go into A, B, C, D, and E. So A is asymmetry. Things that are more perfectly round have a less likely chance of being a cancer. Things that are really kind of asymmetric, looks different on one side than the other, is going to have a higher chance of it being a melanoma. If the border is irregular, so like maybe more jaggedy compared to like perfectly round, those things are much more likely to be a cancer. Things that have color that aren't diffuse, or let's say it's darker in one spot and lighter in another spot, things that are more like just a uniform color that are pretty similar throughout, less likely to be cancer. Things that have kind of different colors, much more likely to be cancer. When it starts to get over the size of, people talk about 6 millimeters, but being a metrically challenged country, 6 millimeters about the.
What are you talking about?
I get it. I'm not very good at either. The kind of the eraser of a pencil is about 6 millimeters. So things that kind of get to be over the size of that are things that we need to start taking advantage of, or to take notice of. And then the last one is evolution. So something that has kind of been the same for a long time, and now all of a sudden is either getting bigger, or it's bleeding, or something has changed about it. Those should really get our attention up. And then just if you got something on your body that, say it was like a scab and it's just not healing, those are things that should get checked out. But to the question that we started with, are there people walking around right now with melanoma? Almost certainly.
Wow.
All the time. It's always one of my first questions, like, was this something that you noticed? Was it the dermatologist noticed? And sometimes it's something somebody noticed and said, hey, this changed. But often it's a family member said, hey, what's that? It's in a spot that maybe you can't see because it's on your back or it's on the back of your leg or your arm. And so it's something that a family member might notice, or hey, maybe it's something that your primary noticed just because of an exam, or maybe it's something because you're going to get routine checks. The dermatologist says, hey, I don't remember seeing this before, or this has definitely changed since the last time you were here.
I guess it speaks to, like I said, I mean, when I go get my regular physical, I'm always working, because the blood pressure runs high in my family. I'm very mindful about that. And, I have a cuff at home to check. But I'm probably most worried about, what are, how are my numbers today? My
Sure.
cholesterol. But it sounds like I should also maybe, go in there and lose the shirt and say, hey, I need you to look over my, to add that if that's not being done.
No, I think it is worthwhile.
And I guess it also speaks to the importance of knowing your body.
Correct.
To do, women are encouraged to do self-breast exams. I'm not sure that men are really encouraged to kind of, do a check and just see, so that you can notice a mole. Wait a minute, I don't think that was there. Where did that come from?
Yes. No, I think knowing your body and knowing what's there and kind of being attuned to things that are either new or different or changing is super important.
Can you get skin cancer from other ways than the sun? I mean, you don't spend a whole lot of time outside, and when you do, you lather up your. And so, if you're not doing a tanning bed, if you are really limiting your exposure in the sun, can you get it from family genes?
There are some genes that do increase the risk of melanoma, and so knowing what your family history is, if there are others in the family that have had melanoma, that's something to definitely be attuned to.
It really speaks to, I mean, it seems like across the board, I've been pretty public about my prostate cancer journey. My father was successfully treated for prostate cancer, and so it was on my radar, but just in my conversations with people who stopped me and asked me about my journey, hey, what's the latest? I find a lot of people are not aware of the family history, and it just seems like, once again, with skin cancer, that also speaks to, have a good conversation with your family to know what's going on with grandma and granddad and your parents and siblings.
No, for sure. The same. My dad had prostate cancer a few years ago, so as soon as I found that out, I make sure that that I get checked for that as well.
All right.
So yes, family history is very important.
We're about to wrap it up. What would you hope are like maybe the 3 key takeaways from this conversation?
I think that skin cancer is the most common type. Most of them tend to not be aggressive. Protection from the sun is the most important thing that you can do to try to prevent it. So, making sure that you stay covered or stay in the shade, hats, sunscreen, things like that to enjoy our beautiful weather. And if you see something you're concerned about, make sure you get it checked.
All right. And I like the point you said about the time window of when, what did you say, 10 to 4? What was
say
it?
about, to me, like about 10 to 4 is like when the sun is at the highest. And
so maybe be mindful of that.
yes.
All right. Dr. Wilson, thank you, man. I appreciate
Yes.
this conversation.
Thank you.
All right. And we thank you for joining this edition of The Healthy Dude. I'm Kurt Williams.